wanting to, even as we see the availability of such are increasing. Listen, we had a bunch of our former presidents get together and really kind of collaboratively say, let's get the vaccine, check it out.
We've lost enough people and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Now it's up to you.
All right, former presidents and former first ladies.
Yeah, that's right. Some familiar voices you heard. George W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, and of course, Bill Clinton. One name missing, though.
Yeah.
Former President Trump.
Exactly.
He did not take part.
But we do know he and the former First Lady, Melania, did get the vaccine.
They did. They got it in secret, though, at the White House before they left.
All right. So, nonetheless, we're hearing a lot of people come out and say, let's get the vaccine. So let's get through kind of where we've come, what we've come through over the past year and where we are. Rupali LeMay, she is Associate Scientist for the Departments of International Health at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. It is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. She's on the phone in Falls Church, Virginia. Rupali, thanks for letting us kind of put that out, because that was kind of a big deal. You are seeing lots of leaders and leadership come out and really encourage Americans to get the vaccine. And that's something you've been watching as well.
That's right. Thanks so much for having me. And I think it's really important as people get the vaccine because it is a new product. And there tends to be, I think, maybe people might have more concerns because it is a new vaccine. So it's really important to get folks that people trust out there talking about their experiences and showing people that they're also getting the vaccine to show that they trust the process and the product.
So the reason I brought up President Trump not taking part in this is because there's new research coming from the Pew Center that says that partisan differences are seen in vaccine intent. Democrats are now 27 percentage points more likely than Republicans to say they plan to get or have already received a coronavirus vaccine. I wonder from your perspective if you think that it's a missed opportunity for the former president not to come out publicly. He did at CPAC. He said he told everyone at CPAC to get a shot, but not to participate in a video like this and not be public when he got the vaccine in secret at the White House back in January.
It's a great question. And I think if we track intentions since the beginning of last March, from about a year ago today, we can see that there's always been a bit of a huge change, I would say, with regards to the proportion of Democrats that said that they would be willing to get a vaccine and Republicans. And as you just mentioned in the new Pew report, it's widened compared to what we have seen about a year ago. And so I think anything we can do to really narrow that gap, right, is really important. Do I think that having a political leader that a lot of people, such as former President Trump, did vote for in 2016 and in this last election come out, would that make a difference? Yes, I do think it would. I think even if it's not him, I think other Republican leaders, if they came out and really talked about the process of getting the vaccine and, maybe questions that they may have had that they were then allayed after they talked to a healthcare provider or a vaccine scientist, I think it would go a long way, especially when you look at disparities by state. And you look at sort of political ideology by state, and we're starting to see some of those differences as well.
And listen, we understand, right, Rupali, why there might be certain segments of our population, particularly the Black community, who said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this. I get it. Having said that, what are you hearing when it comes to community leaders? We've talked to folks, certainly religious leaders who are trying to reach out to their communities, to especially in minority communities, to help them step up. What are you seeing? Are we making any progress along those lines?
I think it's a great question, and it's a lot of work that I have been focusing on with colleagues, is that we have been going to African-American churches and talking to congregation members and really, trying to be there as resource persons so that when people do have questions about the vaccines, we're able to answer those. I have to give a huge sort of hats off, I would say, to religious leaders, especially within the African-American community, that I think are really going above and beyond. They want to make sure that their members have the right information that they need to make an informed decision. And a lot of them have reached out to, I know, not only myself, but other colleagues that have worked in vaccine science and have been asking individuals to come and sort of sit in on these listening listening sessions so that individuals that have been studying the vaccine science are there for them to ask questions. And so I think we are starting to see some of that progress.
Right.
However, I think to your point earlier, I think there's, as you know, medical trauma, historic medical trauma because of experimentation. And so I think that, it's going to be hard to eradicate it overall, but I think we're doing better with regards to disparities. The problem is still going to be access, which tends to be more of the issue, not necessarily intention, but access to the vaccine is also becoming a problem.
Well, it's interesting because I was going to ask you, okay, so tell me about what are the questions people are asking, but if it's increasingly maybe not that people, and certainly within minority communities, are hesitant, but it's just about having the access, then what are we making any progress in that? Because it does feel like, Tim and I talk about this, it feels like in our spheres that we are seeing either family members or people we know that are increasingly being able to get access to the vaccine, which it didn't feel that way maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago.
Absolutely. I think states are doing an amazing job of ramping up. We now have a third vaccine product, which will also help, I think, ease a lot of the issues that we were having with supply. The problem that we are seeing is that the outreach is not necessarily matching the segment of the population. And what I mean by that is when you're asking individuals to essentially pre-register for their priority group online, and as you can imagine, you have huge segments of the population that is just not comfortable registering online. And that's really where there is a mismatch. And we've talked to several states about this, is that how do we make sure that we recruit and we really communicate our outreach in a way that is accessible for the segments that are eligible. And I think states are still sort of catching up to that, if you will. We're not quite there yet.
That's huge. I never even thought about that, right? Because you have to put in a ton of information online. And if you, listen, a lot of people might not be comfortable with that.
Not only if you're not comfortable, but if you don't have regular access to the internet, if you're not somebody who accesses the internet through a PC, or maybe a smartphone is the primary way you're doing that, and it's not necessarily a mobile-friendly site. So what does that look like, Rupali? Does it look like it looks like door to door with the census? I mean, is that what we are going to have to do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think there's a number of different ways that we can go about doing this. So earlier on in the pandemic, we were working with the city of Baltimore to let people know, for example, if they needed to get tested, right? Because this was sort of an issue kind of earlier on, about a year ago. And one thing that I thought was really interesting and innovative was the city put in leaflets in water bills, right? So you have your water bill, and then in that, there's a leaflet of information that there was a call-in number that you could call, and different ways in which you can get really assistance if you needed help getting testing. I think doing something similar like that, because the one thing that we have learned, especially going to these different congregations that tend to be filled with individuals that are 55 and older, by the way, they do say things like, well, I don't know how to get online, or how would I look for an appointment at cvs.com? And so part of that is understanding, can we help with peer navigators, which has really been happening in a number of different countries with regards to any sort of a treatment option? Is that something we could do? But I think there is still a long way to go. And luckily, a lot of individuals that are older can at least have access to individuals that do feel comfortable getting online.
Why don't we just do it why don't we just do after a hurricane or, something really terrible where there's the Red Cross comes in, there's big tents, we're feeding people, we're handing out water. Yep. It's done overnight. It's just line up and get it done.
Yep. It's a great idea, and they're starting to do that in some states. For example, I know Hawaii was sort of first in this because they started sort of mass vaccination sites, if you will, that do not require appointments. I believe they had walk-ins at stadiums. And this was several months ago, right? So they were sort of ahead of it in that way because they understood. They were like, well, people aren't going to get online, right? This isn't a way that we're going to be able to get people to get an appointment. And so I think as more states are able to do that and, move towards that model, then I think we'll be able to more quickly and rapidly, I think, ramp up how many people are actually getting a shot in the arm.
Well, it's interesting because we are seeing still increased demand, more demand than supply in many places right now. Yesterday, we learned that the state of Alaska is reducing the age to anyone who works in the state or lives in the state over the age of 16 will soon be able to get the vaccine. At the same time, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida said the vaccine could be open to all adults in April. Are these the right moves right now when we do still have demand exceeding supply and among certain demographics and age groups?
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? I think the goal here is to make sure that we're allowing access to populations as quickly as possible so that we can get a proportion of the population vaccinated as soon as possible. But I think that can go hand in hand with still continuing to do outreach where we are seeing disparities, right? So whether that be, a pop-up sort of vaccination clinic where they set it up in the neighborhood, they allow people to come in, they allow people to get vaccinated without, having pre-registration, et cetera. But I think it's something that you could do simultaneously, side by side. And I think that's the only way we're really going to be able to reach people that really need to get the vaccine that are more at higher risk of exposure.
All right, so Rupali, the question that Tim and I love to ask people, it's okay, here we are a year in. I don't know, what's the timeline, do you think, for this year where we start to feel, quote unquote, normal?
It's so funny. We were just looking at models this morning, with our infectious disease dynamic modeling unit. And one of the questions that I had, of course, is, what are we looking at? And I think if folks can continue to do the non-pharmaceutical interventions, and what I mean by that is social distancing, still, wearing a face mask for the most part, still meeting outside. I think if we can stay at the levels that we have been engaging in those types of activities, we should start to see the summer is starting to look actually really quite nice with regards to how supply is changing with Johnson & Johnson coming in and Merck helping with that product development process, as I think you all know. I think the key here is going to be, we then see things like what happens in Texas, where all of a sudden they're repealing a mask mandate. And our concern there, as you can imagine, is that are we at the right threshold of a population with regards to a population acquiring immunity to be able to go there yet? And that's the concern, is that are we going to have setbacks because of that, right? So is that going to be pushing it? So I think that's going to be the key here is as governors decide to reopen states, are they doing it safely? Are they doing it too early? Really, that's going to impact how we're going to look.
Going to need that state-to-state passport. We can just see it.
I see it now.
Of a pandemic passport. Rupali LeMay, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Associate Scientist over at Johns Hopkins, the Bloomberg School of Public Health. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
So you and I have spent a lot of time talking about 1 year ago and where we are today.
We have, and somebody who's been thinking about that too is Emma Court, and in just a few minutes she's going to be joining us talking about this great feature where she follows 10 Americans and how their life has changed over the last year from very diverse groups.
I love it, right? Just really checking on
Fantastic.
different parts of our world and our economy. All right, we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business stories. A check on that rally. Here is Charlie Pellet.
And I thank you very much, Carol Master. Here's what's going on. We have got stocks holding at or near session highs. A broad market rally underway on this Thursday, March 11th. Stocks jumping to records powered by a renewed rally in technology. Treasury yield showing signs of stabilizing ahead of a $1.9 trillion spending injection from the federal government. You heard President Biden sign it right here on Bloomberg Radio. Right now, let's begin with NASDAQ up 2.65%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up again, surging 346 points. NASDAQ 100 Index up now by 2.6%. Russell 2000 up today by 2%. Dow Transports up by 1.25%. And the Philadelphia Stock Exchange's Semiconductor Index, otherwise known as the SOX, up now by 4.3%. S&P 500 Index, to put it all in context, up 53
Megan
now. Up
decided this was a customer.
1.4%.
She would
The Dow's up
sidestep.
308, higher by 1%.
Megan didn't want it at all. I mean, she's changed the rule book totally. I don't know whether she went and did it because...
Gold is down $3 the ounce at $17.23, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.5%, $66.02 a barrel. Denmark and now Italy have joined other European countries in suspending use of a batch of AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine due to safety concerns in a further setback for the shot just as immunizations were ramping up. The European Medicines Agency says benefits do outweigh risks, and it is investigating such concerns, but says it's found no evidence linking the vaccine to clotting. Dr. Jason Farley is a nursing professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
So anything that ups the body's response to infection, particularly the inflammatory responses, can trigger the clotting cascade. And we do see it lower risk in younger individuals with fewer comorbidities, and that risk rises both with age as well as underlying disease state.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. AstraZeneca shares down 1.8% among some of the other vaccine names that we track. Pfizer down 0.3%. Partner BioNTech up 4.4%. Moderna surging today by 7%. Johnson & Johnson up by 0.5%. Recapping, technology rallies today. NASDAQ 100 Index up 2.6%. NASDAQ Composite Index also up 2.6%. S&P up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. You know, Carol, you and I have been talking a lot about it being a year since the World Health Organization called this a pandemic. Let's think about what has happened during that year. 29 million infected here in the United States, 529,000 dead, and about 10 million who are unemployed.
That's big disruption, if you think about it.
A big,
Huge.
big disruption. I mean, it's absolutely shocking when we really think about those numbers. Emma Court is somebody who has been thinking a lot about those numbers. She's a healthcare reporter at Bloomberg News and joins us on the phone right now from New York City. Emma, your latest feature follows 10 Americans over the last year. It's a diverse group. It includes a comedian like Mike Birbiglia. It includes a psychiatrist. It includes a physician. It includes a business leader, a funeral home director. How their lives have changed over the last year. What is a common thread that runs through their stories?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I think we're all trying to find ways to process what's happened over the last year and understand these tremendous changes that have occurred in our lives and in the world at large. I think the common thread between a lot of these stories, and I think many of us probably recognize this in our own lives, is these sort of themes of loss and grief and trauma and sorrow, but also, change and adjustments and coping. And so, we spoke with, a funeral director in California, for instance, who, just a couple months ago lost not just her father, with whom, she and her mom and her son lived, but also 2 uncles. And she's also grappling with a new reality at work where funeral homes, I think especially in California, have been just absolutely overwhelmed and have had to start waiting lists for people coming in and even turn some families away. And that's just been, as you can imagine, incredibly difficult. She said it's almost unheard of in that industry. And then you have things like, Mike Birbiglia, who, initially when the pandemic started thought, he would never try doing stand-up comedy remotely. And then, what he ended up finding as the pandemic dragged on over the summer, he said, I will try this out. And he found, it's a different experience. He said it's harder for sure than the Comedy Cellar, right? But it's something where he can actually see people now in their living room sitting on their couch, and he can actually see their faces, as opposed to a dark, club where you can only see kind of the front row because of all the bright lights. So I think, we're all changed because of this, and I think our economy has changed, the way we work and live has changed, but there are ways that I think we are finding, maybe not a silver lining, but, new ways of living amid all that.
I love what Mike had to say about reading the room. It's a little bit more difficult when you're doing it virtually. It's like really tough. Right. Speaking about reading the room, I look around the rooms here now that I'm back at work, but I think about, too, my room at home when I was working. There was a lot of yoga pants. There was a lot of casual wear. I've worn a lot of jeans back at the office, which I haven't done in years. Fashion industry, that's another one. Retail, like it's just been really an upheaval there as well. And you talked to Valerie Steele over at the museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology.
Yeah, we did, and it was funny. She referenced this quote about how sweatpants basically mean a person has given up. Well, I think a lot of us then have given up over the last year because that is I'm wearing leggings right now as we speak.
Just giving up from the waist down.
I would not wear that into the office, but I think it's interesting. She was saying this was a trend that was in the works already, right? You think of that sort of San Francisco aesthetic, the Allbirds, the hoodies to work, and so this was a trend that was really kind of more accelerated by the pandemic, that it didn't just sort of come out of nowhere. And she said, if we go back to the office, even if it's kind of part-time, people will be doing more dry cleaning and, maybe they'll be wearing their suits a couple of days a week. But it seems like it's kind of here to stay at this point.
And we only have 10 seconds left. Do we continue to bake? You talked to Karen Kohlberg, co-CEO of King Arthur Baking Company. We all know those flour shortages.
Right. So they, the baking trend is, they think it's here to stay. You're hopefully not going to be making sourdough every day the way maybe you were in the beginning of the pandemic. But, now that you know how to make sourdough, here we go, sourdough for lunch. So.
God, listen, I was on a hunt for flour many months ago.
Yeah.
It was really tough. It's a great right through of just, so many individuals being impacted, all of us, by the pandemic. Really appreciate it. Emma, thank you so much. Bloomberg News healthcare reporter Emma Court. All right, let's get over to world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol, President Biden is wasting no time and signed the American Rescue Plan this afternoon, a day earlier than advertised.
This historic legislation is about rebuilding the backbone of this country and giving people in this nation, working people, middle-class folks, people who built the country, a fighting chance.
Biden will mark the one-year anniversary of the pandemic with a special primetime address to the American people tonight. He's expected to talk about the next phase of the government's response to the pandemic. You can listen right here on Bloomberg Radio at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Attorney General Merrick Garland is back at the Justice Department, where he previously worked. He says he's ready to work on building back trust in the department.
Together, we will show the American people, by word and deed, that the Department of Justice pursues equal justice and adheres to the rule of law.
Garland's official swearing in will be held later this afternoon. Warren Buffett has been one of the world's richest people for decades. Now he's in the ultra-rarefied company of 12-figure billionaires.
The Berkshire Hathaway chairman's wealth jumped to $100.4 billion yesterday, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. That makes him the sixth member of the $100 billion club, along with Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk of Tesla, and Buffett's friend Bill Gates. Buffett's hot hand as the Oracle of Omaha has slipped in recent years during the tech boom, but government stimulus, loose central bank policy, and the surging equity market have all combined in recent months to lift all boats among the extremely rich. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. Listen, we've talked about so much over the pandemic, but I do feel like there has been a common thread of real estate ouch to real estate opportunity.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing right now, at least in Manhattan. Manhattan renters trading up drive, big gain in new leasing. February signings, Carol, rose 112%.
That's a big jump.
In Manhattan.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, compared to the same month last year. This is according to appraiser Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Element. They put out a report today, biggest monthly gain since April of 2011. And basically what we're seeing is renters who are looking to capitalize on record concessions, also some of those falling prices. That's why it's happening. And leasing gains, especially strong for higher end units. Listen, your money can go further now.
Yeah,
is what people are seeing.
Okay, so one thing that I love about this conversation is it's
What?
absolutely shifted in like 6 or 8 months, right? The conversation 8 months ago, 10 months ago was Manhattan is dead, New York City is dead. The conversation that's happened over the last 3 months has been, this is a really good time to move to New York City if you've always wanted to live there and haven't been able to afford it.
I feel like this is a version, forgive me, judge me if you want, but it's like you've seen it on Sex and the City and so many other different shows, or I think on Seinfeld, where you're looking at the obits to see like where there's going to be an available apartment, like from somebody who's lived there for a long time, like bad news coming into good news because it can be an opportunity.
Yeah, I believe you're referring to
Sorry,
either
everyone, don't judge me.
One of the episodes in season 1 or season 2 of Seinfeld. I've watched the whole season very recently. All seasons very recently.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so there's that story going on. And listen, just this to piggyback on what we talked about, like the big Wall Streeters are moving to Florida. Dow Jones has a story out. Home buyers are heading to Florida during COVID, but nearly as many are moving out. So while you do think everybody's going south, maybe not so much.
Yeah, and look, it comes after yesterday's story here at Bloomberg that our colleagues wrote, where they actually talked to a lot of people who had been in Florida for a long period of time who are thinking about or coming back to New York City.
Exactly. So it's interesting. It's important to see what the longer term trends are ultimately, because we've seen a lot of movement because of the pandemic, at least in the last year. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow off session highs, S&P pushing higher. We're looking at records, though. NASDAQ really the standout today. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 2.6%. Technology rallies again. The NASDAQ 100 Index also up 2.6%. Stocks jumping to records, powered by a renewed rally in tech shares as Treasury yield shows signs of stabilizing. Right now, the 10-year yield 1.52%, 10-year down 1/32. Gold lower by $2 the ounce at $17.24, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.5%, $66.03 for a barrel of WTI. Again, the S&P up 50 now, up 1.3%. The Dow up 270, up 0.8%. NASDAQ is rallying 343. That is a gain of 2.6%. First day out for South Korean e-commerce giant Coupang, which is backed by SoftBank Group. Shares are surging now by just about 54%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. March is Women's History Month, and Bloomberg Radio is looking back at some of the women who played a vital role in American history. Here with more is Bloomberg's Renita Young.
On this day in women's history in 2006, Michelle Bachelet is sworn in as Chile's first female president. She's a lifelong socialist, former political exile, and ex-prisoner of the military dictatorship. Her rise highlighted a cultural shift in a mostly Roman Catholic country that was long regarded as among the most conservative in Latin America. It was also a nation where at the time divorce was only recently legalized and abortion was still illegal at the time. Women were also often earning as much as 40% less than men with similar jobs. By contrast, Bachelet was an agnostic and a single mother of 3. She was also the first popularly elected South American female president whose political career was established independently of a husband. She served 2 separate terms as president of Chile. That's today in women's history. I'm Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Renita, thank you so much. So later on, we're going to be talking with the Ocean Spray CEO about the TikTok video that went viral during the pandemic. So looking forward to that. But Tim, we are living in a world where it feels like just about anybody can get famous on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.
It's something we talked to Nick Bilton about just a few weeks ago.
Right, being famous.
Yeah, he did that HBO documentary.
Which was really, really cool. And listen, as our Bloomberg News technology reporter Sarah Fryer found out, it's a lot easier. You can do that, but it's a lot easier to make a living doing it if you are white. So joining us with more on the story is Max Chafkin, features editor at Bloomberg Business Week. He's with us on the phone in Queens, New York, along with Bloomberg Business Week editor Jill Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. This is a deep dive that just once again shows us the inequities about doing something in this world, but you're treated differently, paid differently if you're black or if you're white.
That's right, and just a reminder that this is all part of the equality issue of Bloomberg Business Week, which has been rolling out all week, and we've got to talk about taxes a little bit, and then instead of taking money, talk about making money, but some people get to make more than others. Max, great to talk with you about this feature that you edited, and tell us what Sarah found as she dug into the reporting.
The feature is about what you probably should think of as sort of the new Hollywood. So this is the world of influencers, YouTubers, TikTokers, and memers, and so on. Basically, anyone who's kind of making content for mobile phones and for young people. And obviously, we're living through this moment that starting last summer where everyone around the world, and especially or marketers included, basically became much more aware of racial issues, Black Lives Matter movement. We started seeing all of these kind of Instagram takeovers, being pushed by both activists, but also lots and lots of big companies. And what Sarah found out is often the people who are actually making this content are being paid less. So they're making content that is in some ways narrowing a cultural gap, but there's still a pay gap.
So, when it comes to social media, and this is something that Sarah addresses in her piece, one of the promises, all the way back to when the internet was really founded, right? It would democratize things. It was a meritocracy. People would be treated equally. these social platforms, it's not a meritocracy, is it, Max?
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the really interesting things in this story. Sarah has some reporting from a former Facebook employee who was working on the rollout of one of these new, social media features for Facebook, and he, encouraged his bosses to try to sign up some Black and Hispanic influencers on the platform because they are some of the biggest, users of Instagram, some of the, some of the most popular people on the site, and so it made a lot of sense. Even from a business perspective. And as this source described, he was basically shot down because Facebook said, well, look, we don't have relationships with these people. We don't have relationships with non-white influencers, which is, on one hand, that's kind of an explanation, but it's also, of course, an indictment because, that's a huge oversight, especially for a company that is supposed to be focused on data. What the piece argues, really persuasively is, in the old days, of the entertainment industry, we're really used to hearing about, basically white male studio executives, hiring, propagating their own biases. And we see the same kind of thing happening with social media companies where you have a lot of basically white executives, white marketers, and of course, who are they going to hire? They're going to hire people like them.
Hey, Max, so how much money are we talking about here in general? Like how big of an industry have influencers become, and what's the pay disparity actually look like for them? Yeah, so the biggest social media influencers, are pulling in millions of dollars a year, as much as $100,000 a post. The kind of like middle of the road influencers are making anywhere from, a few $100 to several $1,000s to say make a TikTok video for a brand. The lead example of this story, you had kind of an up and coming influencer, Sydney McRae, who created this dance, for a record label, was paid $500 to do it, and then she saw a white influencer come in later and was paid by an affiliate of that label, basically, probably something like 10 times more. And that, that white influencer had a lot more followers. So you could argue there should be some difference, but there is something a little bit staggering about somebody who creates this art and then it's, performed by a white person for a much, much larger figure.
Well, the other thing, we talk about this a lot when it comes to women, when it comes to minorities just in the business workplace, of having kind of mentors and people and the infrastructure in place to bring along often, people like yourselves. There is, Sarah writes in her story, Max, about the Crib, which is a group of well-known influencers, minorities who are banding together to kind of learn from one another.
Yeah, this editing a story caused me to have to get up to date on hype houses or sometimes known as content
come on.
Are we going to see one in Queens soon?
Yeah.
If Andrew Yang is elected mayor, I think. So the deal is basically these are sort of collectives of influencers. Brands will, sometimes sponsor the entire house, and like these, it's like a group of attractive young people. They produce content mentioning the brand, and Sarah spoke with a new one, which is, focused on, Black influencers. They call the Crib around the corner, as you said. And what's interesting is, that this group, they signed up a big corporate sponsor, AT&T. It's just launching now. I mean, this is something that's happening at the moment.
Right.
And they're really excited about it because from the point of view of the influencers, like it allows them to kind of compare notes on pay, because that's one of the big issues here. We have people, these kind of up and coming stars. It's just like in Hollywood, right?
Right.
No one knows exactly what they're worth.
Yeah.
And that creates opportunities to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and they're right, exactly. Good stuff. There's so much detail in this story. Max, thank you so much. And our thanks to Jill Weber as well. That story by Sarah Fryer. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Business Week continues. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is next.
news, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Thursday, March 11th. Stocks off session highs, still looking at records. Stocks are rallying, powered by a renewed advance in technology shares as Treasury yield shows signs of stabilizing ahead of a $1.9 trillion spending injection from the federal government. You heard President Biden signed it into law here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 reclaiming a record in a broad rally led by technology and consumer discretionary shares. S&P up now by 45 points, up 1.2%. The NASDAQ 100 index is up 2.4%. The NASDAQ Composite Index now up 2.5%. NASDAQ up 327 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average again off session highs, up 232, up now by 0.7%, on track though for a record. 10-year yield 1.52%. 10 years down 230 seconds. Gold is down $2.20 the ounce at $17.24, a drop of 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 2.6%, $66.12 for a barrel of WTI. The European Central Bank has pledged to ramp up buying government debt in coming months in a bid to contain rising bond yields that threaten to derail the region's economic recovery. Here's ECB President Christine Lagarde, who you heard live on Bloomberg Radio.
On the one hand, better prospects for global demand, bolstered by the sizable fiscal stimulus and the progress in vaccination campaigns, are encouraging. On the other hand, the ongoing pandemic, including the spread of virus mutations, and its implications for economic and financial conditions, continue to be a source of downside risk.
Again, recapping, equities are higher with the S&P up now by 46 points, a gain of 1.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, folks, check it out. Among our most read stories on the Bloomberg about Apple's foray into the car market, how it may end up, Tim, actually going back to its own playbook on how to kick kind of into high gear when it comes to autonomous vehicles.
Look, I think it's fair to say that Apple knows how to launch a product or two.
Yeah. It does indeed. So our go-to on all things Apple is Bloomberg News technology reporter Mark Gurman. He's back with us on the phone in LA. Listen, you know, we are watching this so closely. So where are we when it comes to Apple? What do you find out in your reporting, Mark, when it comes to them moving forward on cars?
The Apple car is probably going to be one of the more exciting things to happen from the company or anyone in the tech industry over the next decade or so. And, you know, unfortunately for Apple, they've had many talks with existing car makers that have sort of fizzled out. They've talked to Ferrari, they've talked to Hyundai Kia, they've talked to Nissan, they've talked to, you know, basically anyone you could name, any car you see in a parking lot, they've talked to them, right? But the real strategy that Apple typically uses for developing a car is, or any product, they design it and they ship out the production externally, right? And that's probably where they're going to go for this car based on what we're hearing.
So does that mean that they don't work with an established car manufacturer like some of those companies that you mentioned, VW, Hyundai?
If they can find an existing car maker that is willing to dilute themselves to being sort of the Foxconn in that scenario, meaning, you know, any normal person has no idea that this is a BMW or an Audi at its heart. They think of it just as the Apple car, then very likely they might want to work with them, right? When you buy an iPhone, most people don't know it's made by Foxconn.
Right.
Absolutely. But one thing that Foxconn and the Apple relationship have going for it is that Foxconn doesn't make a Foxconn branded smartphone. And some of these car companies obviously do. So they would be helping a company potentially, I mean, depending on the price point, compete with themselves.
Exactly. So that's where there's two scenarios. In one scenario, that could be a good thing for a car company that doesn't, for some reason, believe in their own ability to continue building cars and selling cars. It could be a company that has the ability to produce cars, but they're not selling as well as they used to. It's a company that really just believes that it can make more money long term by being that Apple partner. On the other hand, I tend to agree with you, Tim, that they really will have to find another angle. And that other angle is Foxconn and Magna. Those are basically equivalents to Foxconn for building the iPhone. This Magna company, they build Audis, Jaguars, Land Rovers, all sorts of cars, and they have the ability to do so for Apple. In fact, Apple has talked to them many times about building the car. Foxconn now has their own automotive unit that could do the same. So, there are solutions here to that problem.
Wait, tell us a little bit more about Magna, like who they are, because this is like one of those things I can see people like, all right, wait, I'm taking notes here.
That's funny. So Magna, they are based in Canada. They have offices in Detroit, also in Europe, and they are the equivalent to a manufacturer for the iPhone, Foxconn, right? So a car company, I'll use Audi as an example. They come up with the car design, they come up with a car platform, they come up with all the bells and whistles for the car, but Magna produces it, right? That's different than Tesla, which has its own production facilities. So Magna is basically a company that produces and manufactures cars and, designs equipment for cars that car brands customize, right? It would be very much basically, Magna is the Foxconn of the car industry.
It's outsourcing, right? That's exactly what it is. Like, I'll design it, I'm in control of what it looks like, but then you guys kind of do the down and dirty work of actually putting it together.
Yes, but I think it's outsourcing 0.5. If you want to put a brand on it, in the sense that Apple is, down in the ditches with them, right? They are hand in hand with the production facilities. Apple doesn't have any of the liability, but they're in there.
Yeah. So, Mark, is a car happening? Like, how far along is Apple in the process of this? And based on the so many years of reporting that you've done on Apple, is there like a time when you can think that Apple's been this far along in the development of something and has abandoned it?
Oh, definitely. I think they were even farther down the road last time they were trying to develop a car back in the mid-2010s. So like between 2014 and 2017, they were pretty far down the road before pulling the plug to focus on the underlying autonomous system, right? Nothing stops them from pulling the plug again. But I think given the new leadership and the new strategy, this is something they're pretty comfortable going down the road with.
Because is it safe to say, I mean, we've talked about this so many times, and, go back a few years and everybody's like, oh my God, all they do is a phone, they need something else. I mean, could this be the big something else, Mark, that really moves the needle when it comes to their balance sheet? Not like that balance sheet needs a lot of help, but you know what I mean.
In some respects, yes. Right? Okay. In some respects, yes. I think it would definitely, add billions of dollars to their balance sheet. It would take a lot of time, but this is not a company run for, 2025. This is a company run for 2075. So they have the time, and I see this happening. I really, truly do.
Wow.
Do I see it happening in 3 years? Absolutely not. Would I sign up for a new 3-year lease, next week? Of course, right? As an Apple fan, because it's not coming in the next 3 years.
Is it like the Tesla model? Like, right? People were putting money down ahead of it happening.
I doubt that Apple would go down the Tesla route, but I can see them throwing out the classic playbook and announcing the car 2-3 years before launching it, right? Because you can't keep a car secret for that long.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like a phone that you can hide, or an iPad you can hide. Okay, so for the uninitiated, what does this thing look like? What is it? How do you experience it? And we only have about 30 seconds left.
In terms of the car, I mean, I think it's very unclear how it would look. I'm not sure Apple completely knows, but one of the things I'm hearing is Apple is seriously investigating what does the interior of a car look like. How can we reimagine, re-architect the inside of a car for a world with you not behind the wheel?
Wow.
Yeah, I think of those, models that people have put together where all the seats are facing each other. There's nothing like looking out, a dashboard or anything. Something really kind of off the charts.
I can't even imagine it. I can't even picture what it's going to look like.
Oh, my gosh. Mark Gurman, thank you so much. Really thoughtful. Love checking in with you. Mark Gurman, technology reporter at Bloomberg News, on the phone in L.A. I have to tell you, I'm looking at this Magna International company, as you mentioned, based in Canada. We're going to have to get these guys on. Because you think about, this is like one of those plays, if you're smart and can think long-term, that if this ultimately happens, that would be a big boost to this company.
I also think consumers have no idea that this is a company that makes many of the brand names out there.
Totally. All right, let's get back to world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons in our D.C. newsroom. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden has signed the American Rescue Plan into law, starting the process of pumping $1.9 trillion into the economy. He says it's what most Americans support. Tonight, he'll outline what's next for his administration in a special primetime address. You can listen here on Bloomberg Radio at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. And while Biden is basking in the victory, Republicans are plotting their strategy to push back against the stimulus package.
Republicans are invoking the threat of inflation to attack President Biden's spending plans. It might be a hard sell, though. Inflation has been subdued for decades, and economists don't expect that to change. Congressional Republicans, though, have seized on a warning from Harvard economist Larry Summers, who was a top economic official in both the Clinton and Obama administrations. He says the scale of President Biden's relief plan could set off inflationary pressures, quote, of a kind we have not seen in a generation. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The judge presiding over former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's trial has reinstated a third-degree murder charge, giving jurors more options in the case. Chauvin now faces both second- and third-degree murder for the death of George Floyd. Judge Peter Cahill says an appeals court believes a third-degree murder charge, that the fatal action was eminently dangerous to others, could apply if a defendant's actions were directed at one person.
This charge has not come out of left field. It was originally charged. I think the defense has been aware that the state will take every opportunity to try and add it back.
Prosecutors contend Floyd was killed by Chauvin's knee being compressed against Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, this story is, in fact, the third most read story on the Bloomberg in the past 8 hours. And we always kid, but it is no joke. You put bonus in a headline. You were just saying it in the studio. Everybody's going to read the story.
It doesn't matter if you work at HSBC or a competing bank. In fact, you probably want to be working at a competing bank if when you read some of these stories, because you want to know how other people are paid, right?
Totally, right? It's all like, how'd you do? Hey, how'd you do? How'd you do? So this story is about HSBC Holdings CEO Noel Quinn and his top lieutenants were forced to defend bonus cuts to unhappy investment bankers and traders after a year marked by hectic deal-making and volatile markets. So on calls last week with staff at their global banking and markets division, Quinn, along with the unit's co-heads, had to justify why the pool had to be scaled back at the only division that saw revenue increases last year, according to those in the know. I can see it, right? You're like, all right, we're on the call with you. We boosted our numbers. We made our numbers. There was growth. Why aren't you sharing in the wealth?
Yeah, so here's what he said. The executive's telling employees that the pandemic had eroded the bank's overall performance, and also combined with the stark economic backdrop, it meant that it couldn't pay more. Even some bankers who gained top marks for their performance were told that their bonuses would be cut and that they shouldn't expect a pay increase.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, bonuses at HSBC's investment bank and trading divisions were down 15% for 2020, according to the company's annual report, kind of in line with those in asset management and private banking, less severe than in other parts of the bank where cuts topped 20%. But listen, when it comes to investment banking and trading, star bankers, star traders, they are often lured by competitors who can offer higher compensation. So if you make somebody, especially one of those high performers, top performers, a little ticked off, there's always like somebody that was knocking. Come knocking.
You knocked the mic for a second. I heard you knocking the desk, though.
I was trying.
The reduction comes as global banking and markets grew revenue last year by 3%. That came amid a surge in trading. The unit, though, posting a 7% decline in adjusted profit compared to the bank's overall 45% drop as credit impairments jumped.
So we'll see. We'll see if we start to see more movement among some of the big financial firms. We'll certainly keep track of it. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are moving higher. We're looking at records. However, we are off session highs. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks trading in the green, led by gains in the NASDAQ. Dow is currently up 217 points. S&Ps are up 45. NASDAQ rises by 333. The U.S. 10 yield at 1.53%. Gold is down 2, and transports rise 141 points. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were tech and telecom. Only financials and consumer staples fell. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Nike, Microsoft, and Salesforce. And Verizon fell 2.6%. And led to the downside. In other news, Biden signed the $1.9 trillion pandemic relief bill, and Copang opened at $63.50. That IPO was priced at $35. Wrapping things up, DocuSign and Ulta Beauty report after the bell. Live from the First Word breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So another of our most read stories on the Bloomberg, it was also highlighted in Bloomberg's 5 Things to Start Your Day newsletter. That was this morning. It's the subject of a Bloomberg podcast. We're talking about an ancestral search done by our own Bloomberg News senior executive editor of the Americas, Jacqueline Simmons. What she found out during this process, I've listened to some of the podcast. It's really riveting. Jackie joins us on the phone in New York City. Jackie, so good to have you here with Tim and myself. So tell us about what you initially set out to do and kind of why you did it and where it led you.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So this really was born out of a conversation I had with my co-host, Rebecca Greenfield, about how to approach the next season. Just a short reminder, the first 2 were about the gender pay gap. And at the time we were having a discussion, there was George Floyd. And we also saw, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of economic data, whether it was unemployment figures or small businesses closing. And, you could see how the disparity skewed to certain demographics, and especially the Black demographic. And so the thinking behind the series is really a chance to query that gap, knowing that, there were protests in the streets after George Floyd's killing, and knowing that this disparity widening on the back of this major global pandemic. And so that's basically kind of what got us thinking about the story, and that got me thinking about my story and how does my family narrative fit into that.
Well, I don't want to give too much away in the podcast, but what can you tell us about what you found about your own family without giving too much away?
Sure. I mean, in a nutshell, really, it's a can of worms. I think anybody thinking about, their family's history is going to find, that can. But in this case, tracing your roots back to slavery in this country is no small task. There are no clear ledgers. There's no clear record keeping. Census records go back only so far. And a lot of people who really do know the history, have, sadly passed away or forgotten or moved on. I did manage to piece enough of the tale together to understand what we lost, after coming into land in East Texas, however. So, can of worms, but pretty interesting, when you peel back the layers to find out what we gained and then subsequently lost.
Well, and you go back to your great-great aunt and uncle. What's interesting too, and like Tim, we don't want to give away too much because you guys over the season of the podcast kind of work it through, but it gets to that bigger story and something we've been talking about here on Bloomberg Business Week all week about blacks and wealth creation and how you get it. And I think the disparities between blacks and whites, you really dig into that. I mean, wealth happens over generations, and whites have had an opportunity to do that. Blacks have not, at least not as much.
Yeah. So I would say, systemic racism is all about structures in our society, in our economy, our communities that are uneven. And, when I think about the land narrative of our family in Texas, it fits with that because it tells a broader narrative of how you pass on wealth. Just keeping in mind that a lot of the wealth in this country comes from property. I think it's some 40%, in fact. And so when there's disparities in one's ability to access loans, disparities in the way you actually buy property in neighborhoods deemed desirable or less desirable, or when you're in a tax code that puts you at a disadvantage, all that taken together, makes it systemic. And so, our land is part of that narrative pulled from, a different optic.
I wonder about these trends shifting. I wonder about, look, this is a story that has played out in your family over generations. How does this get fixed within our lifetimes? How do we fix these systemic issues? It's a question that we've been grappling with, well, in this current issue of Bloomberg Business Week, of course, but this year and last year, talking about it a lot.
And I would layer on it, why hasn't it been fixed already?
Right.
Yeah, so, that's the kind of, $10,000 question. It doesn't happen overnight. I think, awareness is a first step. And I think that what we saw in 2020 after May was just, kind of woke up a lot of people. However you saw whatever your point of view was, it's sort of the awareness was kind of put front and center about the disparity issue in this country and, quite honestly, the disparity issue around the globe. So how does it get fixed? I think you're going to have a lot of painful conversations. I think you're going to have legislation. I think you're going to take that conversation and awareness to planning level with real specifics. And, the banks are going to have to, change the way that they, operate to some degree in terms of inclusivity, in terms of, the issue that we've had with redlining. Everything right to the tax code. It's a real structural, deeply embedded situation that's going to take, I'm not sure we're going to fix it 100% in our lifetime, I'm afraid.
Which is incredibly discouraging. Listen, this is something we've talked about a lot. It's in the equality issue, too, of Business Week magazine about the tax code and the racism and biasness that we're seeing in it. More on Jackie's story in the Paycheck podcast, a Bloomberg News series. It examines the intersection of money and inequality with Jackie and Rebecca Greenfield, head of diversity coverage at Bloomberg News. Find it at Bloomberg.com or wherever you download your podcast. I was listening, had to stop just before the show, but it is fascinating and interesting and engaging. This is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, a little hint, everybody. Dave Wilson coming by with his chart of the day. Has to do with...
Stonks.
Yes.
Stonks. Sorry, Carol.
A little bit of short selling in there.
Stonks. It's been
All
a
right.
while since I got to say that.
That's all we're giving you. Phone a friend, no more hints. That's what we're doing. All right, let's get to your top business stories. Another check-in with Charlie Pellet. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. We got 28 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks jumping to records, powered by a renewed rally in technology. Treasury yields showing signs of stabilizing this Thursday with a $1.9 trillion spending injection on the way from the federal government. You heard President Biden sign it right here on Bloomberg Radio. Right to the numbers with the S&P up now by 43. That is a gain of 1.1%. The Dow up 207. Off session highs up 0.6%. Technology rally continues. NASDAQ 100 index up 2.5%. NASDAQ Composite index up today by 2.6%. NASDAQ up 339 points, bringing its year-to-date gain back to 4%. To put that in context, S&P this year up by 5%. Could see records at the closing bell today. 10-year yield 1.53%. Gold is down 0.2%, 17.22 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.6%, 66.10 a barrel on WTI. We are a year into the pandemic. Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus vaccine has won clearance from the European Union's drugs regulator, paving the way for the first single injection shot to help bolster the region's sluggish vaccination campaign. Pfizer and BioNTech's coronavirus vaccine blocked 94% of asymptomatic infections in an Israeli study that further builds the case for the shot's overwhelming effectiveness against the virus a year after the pandemic began. And as vaccinations continue to roll out across America, younger Americans are asking the question, hey, when do I get my shot? Dr. Jason Farley is a nursing professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Removing age restrictions, I think, needs to bump up against us pushing into that 80+% of those 65 years of age and older. And in the United States, we're sitting at around 60% of those in that category. So I think that we need to continue to focus on our age categories for the short run, probably end of March, beginning of April, depending on the number of shots that we get out into arms, but then begin to think about the expansion of those categories and getting the next round of people with shots in their arms.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the vaccine names that we track, Pfizer shares, they are down this Thursday, dropping 0.6%. BioNTech up by 4.9%. AstraZeneca tumbling 2.1%. Moderna is surging 8.2% right now. Johnson & Johnson little changed, up by less than 0.1%. Recapping, tech rally underway. S&P up now by 42, up 1.1%. NASDAQ surging 2.6%. Your 10-year 1.53%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. This is Bloomberg.
Wow, that's pretty rough.
I just like to hear the song. I'm not.
Do you know who this is?
No idea.
I wouldn't expect you to.
I'm scared to guess because, I'm gonna get busted for something. What?
Don't even.
Don't even guess. Okay.
I'm gonna give you this.
Okay, thank you.
It's he's a guy who's better known as a songwriter. Among other things, he wrote "Bad Case of Loving You," "Doctor Doctor," the Robert Palmer hit.
Yeah.
You know that one?
Yeah.
Okay, the guy who wrote it, Moon Martin.
Moon Martin.
Okay,
Yes.
can I actually say I did Google and I did see Moon Martin.
Good.
So Google knew.
But
Carol.
I never heard of them, and I was like, or him, and I was right, exactly. Google did know. Google always knows.
Absolutely.
All right, so talk to us about the song in the chart here.
But that just seemed like a fitting sort of way to encapsulate what's going on with the latest chart. I knew I had to do something sort of tied into this week's latest bout of speculation in GameStop and some of the other Reddit trader favorites. So what I did is kind of look at how these surges that we've seen this year and the effect on the short sellers, the ones that were betting against the stocks, how that's kind of played out in the bigger picture when it comes to short selling. And the way that I went about it was to look at the 5 most heavily shorted stocks in the Russell 3000 index based on percentage of float. In other words, the amount of shares available for trading. So took that and then just averaged it, starting at the end of last year. And at that point, the average for the top 5 was about 88% of the float sold short. GameStop was more than 100% back then. But the way it's come down over the last 2 months, we actually got figures for the end of February yesterday. So what you're seeing in the chart is current. You're now down to, for the top 5 short sale favorites, 36% as opposed to 88%. So it just, look, the shorts got burned in GameStop and a whole lot of other stocks like AMC Entertainment and Express and Koss and a whole lot more names like that. So it's clear that to the extent that people are willing to bet against shares at this point, they're not really willing to go out on a limb so much. And that's what this chart is showing us. If you want to know more, send me an email. I'll get it to you along with the explanation that goes with it and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
So Dave, this is amazing, by the way, like that this is actually happening. My question is, this narrative emerged during the GameStop phenomenon that was all about short selling is actually a good thing. It's healthy.
It's part of the market, right?
It's part of the market. And think about Enron, for example. Does this risk that part of the market?
Well, it is a question worth asking because your point is well taken. Short sellers have certainly found companies like Enron in the past where, shall we say, the emperor had no clothes. So if you see the shorts kind of backing away, and it's happening in a broader sense as well. I mean, I saw a figure, I think it was from Bespoke Investment Group, talking about how only 3.1% of the Russell 3000's float is shorted on average, and that's down from like 3.6% at the end of last year. So, there is kind of a broad shift away from betting against companies, and to the extent that investors are having to do the research to figure out which companies to bet against and then placing those bets, in essence, by borrowing and selling shares. I mean, you do have to wonder whether sort of the enforcement mechanism of the market is going to be there in quite the same way that it's been.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring out. All right, good stuff. Dave, thank you so much. Dave's going to be back a little bit later on with his stock of the day. But, we have to remember, shorting a stock, right, part of the trade.
It's part of the trade.
Exactly.
Hey, it makes sense now they're scared.
Right, and can be a warning sign of that there's something, maybe problematic going on at a company. All right, let's get back to world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden this afternoon signed the American Rescue Plan into law a day earlier than expected.
Democrats, independents, our Republican friends have made it clear, the people out there, made it clear they strongly support the American Rescue Plan.
Tonight, the president will deliver his first primetime address to the American public on the one-year anniversary of the pandemic. You can listen to it on Bloomberg Radio at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Republicans are calling for a return to Trump administration policies after officials reported more than 100,000 migrants came to the southern border last month, including more than 9,000 unaccompanied children.
Republican House members from border states called a news conference to denounce President Biden's approach. Debbie Lasko of Arizona.
The reason that thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants are traveling thousands of miles is because of Biden's lax immigration policies.
Kevin Brady of Texas.
The threats against the U.S. Capitol are largely imaginary. The crisis on the border, it is real.
The members echoed President Trump's charge that illegal immigrants cause a crime wave, one of the key issues that helped elect him. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
President Biden's nominee for health secretary has cleared a key hurdle. The Senate voted 51-48 to move ahead with the nomination of California Attorney General Javier Becerra to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer forced the vote to overcome Republican opposition. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. So this story caught our attention, and we just realized in talking in the break that we've got to do more things on NFTs. We're talking about...
non-fungible tokens. Okay, let's talk Beeple.
What is a non-fungible token? Is it like a non-fungible mushroom, or like what is that?
You know what? We're going to have someone else answer that question.
It's like kind of wacky.
It is. It's something, it's been around for a few years, but it's gaining a lot of popularity right now. This NFT selling for $69 million. You know who talks a lot about it on Twitter is Joe Weisenthal.
He does, right?
Yeah, he does. He has a good understanding of it. So on Thursday, this digital artwork, less than a month old, it hammered for $60.25 million at Christie's in New York. The total comes with the buyer's premium, $69.3 million. A digital artwork.
So we're talking now Matisse, Gauguin, Van Gogh. I mean, this is what you're talking. Blue chip masterworks. We're talking about the amount of money that went into this NFT, this digital artwork, is going into the kind of that world. So it's kind of wild. Justin Sun, founder of cryptocurrency platform Tron, bid $60.25 million, according to a Tron representative. That's the hammer price, suggesting it was the winning bid, but apparently a spokesman for Christie's did not say who actually did the buying. That happens.
So a non-fungible token, an NFT, is a digital certificate of authenticity that runs on blockchain technology. Unlike some other artworks, Everyday's, this is from Beeple, doesn't come with anything physical, so it doesn't even have a box or a plaque attached. Bidding started back on February 25th at $100.
So I still don't understand it. I don't.
You're asking the wrong person, Carol. I'm not even embarrassed to say I don't understand it. Like I can't explain it.
Yeah, but what's interesting is, listen, we are living in a year where we're seeing, like, just not necessarily new asset classes, but we're seeing digital currencies in general take off. We're seeing SPACs take off. We're seeing a lot of money going into kind of new worlds of our financial marketplace, right?
I just wonder how you display this.
I don't know. Help. We're going to do more on this for you all because it's definitely things that our world is interested in.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Tape. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We're on track for records. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks jumping to records, powered by a renewed rally in tech shares. Treasury yield showing signs of stabilizing with a $1.9 trillion spending injection on the way from the federal government. S&P 500 reclaiming a record in a broad rally being led by technology and consumer discretionary shares. S&P up 43 right now, a gain of 1.1%. NASDAQ also at a record, up 333 points now, up 2.6%. NASDAQ 100 index up 2.5%. The Dow's up 222, up by 0.7%. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all off session highs. 10-year yield 1.52%. Gold right now up down 0.2%, 17.22 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude higher by 2.6%, 66.08 for a barrel of WTI. Stocks on track for records again, with the S&P up 43 now, up 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, just about 11 minutes left in today's trading session. Great to have back with us Randy Watts, Chief Investment Strategist at O'Neill Global Advisors, with us once again on the phone in Miami. Randy, nice to have you back with us. Feel like there has been a lot going on in the financial markets, and I think everybody's trying to figure out, are we going to see more of a pullback? Is tech overdone? Is there more fluff to come out? Or is it just taking a little bit of the excess out and we're going to move back to the upside? How do you see it, especially on a day where we see the S&P at another record?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back,
Sure.
and I hope everybody's safe and well in New York.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
I think a couple of things. I'm not sure the volatility in the short run is done with. I know the market's very, very strong today. It would not surprise me to see a little bit more volatility, a little bit more of a pullback here. But I do think over the rest of the year, we are going to move higher. And the key driver on that is really the stimulus bill. If you look at the amount of money we've put towards this crisis, and you compare it to the Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis, it's about double. We spent about $2.8 trillion back in that 2008, 2010 period. With the new law that Biden just signed today, that's up to $5.8 trillion, and that money is going to help stimulate the economy. And I think inevitably some of that money is going to find its way into financial assets. So I think the direction of stocks over the rest of the year is actually up.
So you don't think that that's already priced in right now? It was widely expected that this bill would pass without Republican support, and indeed it did.
I think it's one thing to be expected, but I think it's another thing when the money actually starts to flow into the system. And I just think it's such a big number that it can't be ignored. Now, I do worry about the effect it's going to have on inflation and on the bond market longer term. But in the kind of short to intermediate term, I think that money is going to work its way through the system, and that's going to drive stocks higher.
Where does that money flow specifically?
Well, it's going to flow in a lot of places. One of the things is that this bill, fortunately, really helps the bottom third of the country. And I think, as you know, economically, those people tend to be spenders more than savers. So that money is going to get spent, and it's going to drive up the demand for goods and services. That's going to help boost the economy. It's also probably, unfortunately, going to help boost prices a little bit.
Right, but don't you see that, potentially, Randy, that increase in prices, maybe it's just a temporary thing, just some of the disconnect between supply chains reopening, people getting back to work, and kind of everything ramping up to meet that increased demand, especially as the economy gets back on track?
Absolutely. I think there's been a quote, a regime change in bond yields, and I think the path on bond yields is higher also. And I think that is going to suppress the multiple on the market. So really gains in the market have to be driven by earnings. That being said, I think 2021 is going to be a very good year for corporate profits and corporate earnings. Right now, earnings estimates are looking for about a 24% increase for the S&P to about 172, which means the market right now is trading about 23 times. That's awfully fast earnings growth, and I don't think that's all priced in yet. I think stocks are going to react to that positively.
Hey, one thing I want to ask you, because Dave Wilson, our stocks editor, just did a chart, an interesting chart of the day, and it looked specifically on how short positions are way down. And Tim and I were talking, shorting the market is a part of the market, just like going long. And you're someone who have managed both long only and long short hedge funds. I mean, do you see kind of the GameStop effect and maybe people a little bit nervous to take on those short positions? Is that going to be problematic for the financial markets and trading?
I think it's scary to step in front of all this money that's coming out from the government, right? The Fed remains loose. If you look at real rates right now, they're basically negative. The Fed continues its bond buying program, and you have $1.9 trillion coming out from the federal government. So I don't think you want to be a hero and step in front of that fire hose. But eventually that is going to wind itself down. And when it does, I think there'll be much better opportunities to short the market. The market's going to have a big move here driven by liquidity. I do worry about what the other side of that liquidity looks like.
So you did say that the markets will be higher by the end of the year, but it's not going to be a straight line up. There could be some sort of pullback, some sort of correction. What does that look like? How big?
I think that's driven by a couple of things. I think it's driven by increasing yields and pressure on valuations. And, a typical move in the market, though you just had one on NASDAQ, is there usually is 10% volatility peak to trough in a given year. Now, you just had about an 11% pullback on NASDAQ. You haven't had that same level pullback on the S&P. A little more volatility as rates move up would not surprise me. But I think at the end of the day, a stronger economy and stronger earnings are going to overcome that for this year.
So, got to ask you about Bitcoin. I know you recently wrote a column, and I'm just curious, I think, about, if you look at Bitcoin, I'm just looking at it, it's already up almost 100% this year. It's on a tear. How do we need to be smart about it as investors? How do you see it?
I think what's funny about Bitcoin is it was really designed to kind of go around the existing financial system. But now the existing financial system has actually co-opted it, right? Mm-hmm. So Bank of New York is going to start offering digital currency services for custody. People like MasterCard and PayPal and Square are incorporating it into their payment networks. So Wall Street has kind of voted, and they voted that Bitcoin is here to stay and going to be the cryptocurrency of choice. I do think people like it right now because they see it as a store of value. There's a finite amount of Bitcoin that's ever going to be created. Right now, there's about 18.6 million created right now. The finite amount is going to be about 21 million. And I think people are nervous about, as we talked about earlier, because of liquidity and all this money that's being put out by the government, people are looking for stores of value. And I think people are using Bitcoin as a store of value, kind of like they did with gold in the past. It's not a great transaction mechanism because it's actually pretty slow. So I'm not sure if it's going to become like the everyday thing you use to buy your groceries, et cetera. But I think there is value in its scarcity, and I think it's here to stay.
That value, though, do you think it stays, that store of value? It just got about 20 seconds. Does it stay up near these levels, or do you think it's actually headed a lot higher because of that? We're not going to just see an endless amount of it. Just quickly.
I think over the next several years, it's definitely going to move higher. Okay. I think it's up 11 times in the last 12 months. Yeah. So it would not surprise me to see a substantial pullback. Yeah. But where do I think it is 3 years from now? I think it's higher than 57,000 that it's at right now.
Okay, that's fair. Hey, Randy, be well. Thank you, and stay safe. Randy Watts, Chief Investment Strategist at O'Neill Global Advisors, with us from Miami. We've got about 3.5 minutes left in the trading day. We'll break down those closing numbers right here on Bloomberg.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Folks from COSAN ringing that closing bell. Records for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 index, but not for NASDAQ. Right to the numbers, 10-year yield 1.52%, S&P up 40 to finish the session at 39.39, a gain of 1%, extending its year-to-date gain now to 4.9% on the S&P. The Dow, as Carol mentioned, well off session highs, up 188 points today. That was a gain of 0.6%. The standout, NASDAQ, up 329 points, up 2.5%. NASDAQ 100 index up today by 2.4%. Gold down 275 the ounce, down 0.2% at 17.23. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.6%, 66.11 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Stocks jumped to records powered by a renewed rally in tech shares. Treasury yield showed signs of stabilizing with a $1.9 trillion spending injection on the way from the federal government. Well, as for the market backdrop, Randy Watts is Chief Investment Strategist at O'Neill Global Advisors. He was our guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I'm not sure the volatility in the short run is done with. I know the market's very, very strong today. It would not surprise me to see a little bit more volatility, a little bit more of a pullback here. But I do think over the rest of the year, we are going to move higher. And the key driver on that is really the stimulus bill.
After earnings, Oracle down today by 6.5%. Bumble shares surged 10.9%. And GameStop's week-long rally showed signs of fatigue today. Shares of GameStop down by 1.9%. Recapping records for the Dow, the S&P up 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Wild thing, think you move me. I got a few moves I know you'll like. Shaking all over.
Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and shakers.
Shaking, not stirring.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's get to it. Let's take a look at the trade. Charlie breaking down those closing numbers. We did see a rally underway on this Thursday. S&P 500. Keep in mind, though, overall major equity averages higher today. We did see the S&P Dow off their best levels of the session by the close. NASDAQ finishing pretty much at its best level. But if you dig deeper into the broader market, the S&P 500 specifically, kind of a mixed trade in terms of groups. 297 names in the S&P 500. Higher today, 207 lower, 1 unchanged. So it wasn't like it was all in today in terms of gains.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, there are 3 industry groups in the red today. Financials was the laggard, down close to 0.3%. Utilities down just about the same. Consumer staples also in the red to the tune of about 0.2%. On the flip side, though, information technology higher by more than 2%. Communication services higher by 1.8%. And consumer discretionary higher by 1.6%.
And listen, you and I in the break, I was taking a look at some of the weekly numbers so far. We still have 1 trading day to go, but the S&P is up about 2.5% for the week overall. So we've had certainly a risk-on trade this week, and the NASDAQ's up about 3.7% for the week overall.
Yeah, year to date, Dow up 6%. And the S&P 500 up close to 5%.
Yeah, so we've seen, it's pretty decent. Certainly if you're bullish on the market. Hey, let's get to Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponczek looking at the market from so many different angles. I don't know, where should we begin?
I think today was so clear that we saw market resilience. If we rewind back to yesterday, remember the NASDAQ 100 and tech was leading at a time, the NASDAQ 100 up 1.5%. Before that was completely erased. Today, yes, we closed off the highs, but we saw a solid rally really throughout the majority of the day, the NASDAQ closing up 2.5%. But I will also mention that not only did we see a strong rally for the NASDAQ today, but with tech really in full swing, tech, your best performing industry group of more than 2%, what that did was because it's such a heavy weight within the major averages, especially the S&P 500 making up more than a quarter of the entire benchmark. You had the S&P finally close at another record high today. You had the Dow close at a record high today. You had the Russell 2000 small caps close at a record high today. So it just goes to show that even considering the volatility that we have experienced over the past couple of weeks, much of it really focused within technology companies, high growth companies, as bond yields have begun to rise. The day that you see tech really join in on the rally, join in the cyclical rally, it's enough to really push the benchmark to be high.
But let's remind everybody that Oracle is your number 2 decliner in the S&P 500, down about 6.6%, down the most in a year after giving a tepid outlook for growth, Sarah. So it's a reminder, we were breaking down those earnings just 24 hours ago, that not all tech is the same in terms of who's doing well and who's maybe not so much.
Oh, certainly, certainly. I think now more than ever, I have heard investors dividing tech into different segments. You have old tech, you could say, which maybe Oracle would fall into, versus new tech, which some would still classify as some of the mega cap FANG names. Then you move over to another ledge and you have more speculative tech, and that's where you think of the holdings that lie in Cappy with ARK Fund, for example. So it's as if you have 3 different breakdowns within tech, and certainly everything is not the same. One area of tech that did perform very, very well today that I will point out was the semiconductors. Semiconductors, the second best performing industry group within the S&P 500 today, up 3.6%. And there was some news today surrounding the semiconductor industry, with the Chinese semiconductor industry group saying that it's agreed to work with its U.S. counterpart on chip-related issues. There have been some concerns about supply there, so that really providing a boost.
Hey, okay, Sarah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponczak. Just want to mention some headlines crossing the Bloomberg terminal. First of all, Novavax saying its UK phase 3 trial showed a 96.4% efficacy versus COVID. That share price, the ADRs that trade here in the US, they are up about 17-18% in the after hours. Ulta Beauty also coming out with their latest earnings, but the big headline that caught my attention and our attention is that the company's CEO is stepping down, and Dave Kimball, who was president, will assume the role. So Mary Dillon stepping down as CEO of Ulta Beauty, and Dave Kimball, who has been the president of the company, will assume that CEO role as well.
We're also seeing earnings for DocuSign cross right now. DocuSign fourth quarter revenue beat estimates, coming in at $430.9 million versus estimates of $400.7 million. Adjusted EPS also beating estimates, 37 cents a share versus 22 cents for estimates.
Quick check on DocuSign. It's just a tad higher, about 1.7%. It's bouncing around here in the after hours, but we're seeing it down 2%. Then I saw it up about 1%. Right now, still down about 2%. Ulta Beauty, as we mentioned, some news there. That stock is down about 6.2%. Certainly one of those names that's trying to figure out maybe what its role will be and what kind of retail environment we'll have going forward. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson. What's your stock of the day?
Sumo Logic, Tim. It's a provider of internet-based software for monitoring online apps. The company was founded in 2010 and went public last September. The ticker is its first name, SUMO, like Japanese wrestling. Sumo Logic made its initial public offering at $22 a share. The stock fell as much as 24% from that price through late October, and then it took off. Sumo Logic, though, has since given back all its gains. The last of them were lost after fourth quarter figures came out late yesterday. While Sumo Logic's results went over well, its outlook was disappointing. The company's revenue forecast for this year indicated it would do no better than match analysts' average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. Clearly not what investors wanted to see. Sumo Logic dipped below its $22 IPO price and closed at $22.27. That works out to a loss of 13.5%. And the decline may hit especially hard as share sale restrictions tied to the IPO end on Tuesday.
All right, Dave, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dave Wilson with his stock of the day. Vail Resorts also out in the after hours. Looks like a big beat on the bottom line, $362 for the second quarter versus $225 the estimate, and revenue $684.6 versus an estimate of $644. Not seeing any kind of trade here in the after hours at this point, but a name for us to watch certainly into the Friday trade.
People are skiing right now.
Exactly, outdoors.
Yes, it's outdoors.
That's the stuff that's been going on. All right, have a good evening.
Thank you, you too.
Happy almost Friday. All right, let's get to world and national news. Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol, President Biden is wasting no time, and he signed the American Rescue Plan this afternoon, a day earlier than advertised.
This historic legislation is about rebuilding the backbone of this country and giving people in this nation, working people, middle-class folks, people who built the country, a fighting chance.
Biden will mark the one-year anniversary of the pandemic with a special primetime address to the American people tonight. He's expected to talk about the next phase of the government's response to the pandemic. You can listen right here on Bloomberg Radio at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Attorney General Merrick Garland is back at the Justice Department, where he previously worked, and he says he's ready to work on building back trust in the department.
Together, we will show the American people, by word and deed, that the Department of Justice pursues equal justice and adheres to the rule of law.
A lawyer for New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says she reported a groping allegation made against him to police after the woman involved declined to press charges herself. The Albany Times-Union has reported that the aide claimed that Cuomo reached under her shirt late last year. He says he never touched anyone inappropriately. A judge has granted prosecutors' request to add a third-degree murder charge against the former Minneapolis police officer charged in George Floyd's death. Judge Peter Cahill added the charge after the former officer, Derek Chauvin, failed to get appellate courts to block it. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. So the South Korean e-commerce giant Coupang delivered the biggest U.S. IPO offering since Uber Technologies, and then rose to briefly become a $100 billion company in its trading debut. It ended the day at just above $84 billion, but it's a company that's dubbed Korea's Amazon, and it gave the 42-year-old CEO, Bom Kim, a stake worth almost $10 billion. Bom spoke earlier today with Bloomberg's Emily Chang and Matt Miller.
We are here today because we focus on a long-term strategy, long-term vision. We've had teams and shareholders who've been aligned with that long-term vision. I think we'll continue to stay steadfast to that DNA.
All right, that once again was CEO of the company giant, the e-commerce giant, the e-commerce giant Coupang. The CEO is Bom Kim. He caught up with Bloomberg's Emily Chang and Matt Miller earlier. The stock having its IPO, as we mentioned, the biggest U.S. IPO since Uber Technologies. The stock jumping by the close about 41% in its first day of trading. But keep an eye on that. We've been watching what has been a rather busy IPO market. Charlie Pellet, you've been keeping an eye on it as well.
Indeed. What a career this guy has had. Born in Seoul, moved to the United States when he was in middle school, later became a U.S. citizen. While doing government studies at Harvard University, started a student publication called Current Magazine, discussing ideas from writers across colleges. That ended up getting sold to Newsweek in 2001. After trying other ventures, he eventually dropped out of a Harvard MBA, went back to Korea, and turned out pretty good with his company.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, like we've seen with a lot of the big tech companies, especially the newer ones, Kim's going to continue to control the company because of the dual share structure that gives him about 77% of the voting rights, according to the company's filings. And Charlie, that is definitely something we have seen with a lot of these super big tech companies. Again, ticker is CPNG, Coupang, finishing up 41% in its first day of trading. This is Bloomberg.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We're keeping an eye on Novavax shares after hours, surging now by about 25%. Novavax says a UK phase 3 trial showed 96.4 efficacy versus COVID. Again, shares of Novavax surging after hours, up now by just about 25%. There has been a change at the top of Ulta Beauty, but it is an ugly stock reaction. Ulta Beauty's Mary Dillon stepping down as CEO as the country's biggest cosmetics retailer begins to show signs of recovery from a pandemic that has gutted makeup sales. President Dave Kimball will become CEO after the company's June 2nd shareholder meeting. Company's fourth quarter results beat analyst expectations, but Ulta Beauty right now down by just about 10%. Stocks climbed to records today, at least for both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P, not for NASDAQ today, powered by a renewed rally in tech shares as investors eye a $1.9 trillion spending injection from the federal government. S&P up 40, a gain of 1%. The Dow up 188, up by 0.6%. NASDAQ up 329, up by 2.5%. 10-year yield 1.53%. Gold down 0.1%, 17.24 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.6%, 66.11 a barrel. Again, recapping, Novavax says a UK phase 3 trial showed 96.4% efficacy versus COVID. Shares up by roughly 25%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yeah, quite a rally. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So, as we promised at the top of our broadcast, we were going to bring you a lot of the most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal, and this too was one of them. It's about Amazon. It's just how ever so quietly the largest e-commerce platform began building a grocery chain during the pandemic. So here with exactly what Amazon is up to, Bloomberg News technology reporter Matt Day, he is on the phone in Seattle. Matt, good to have you here. So, all right, what has Amazon been up to?
So Amazon, which famously bought Whole Foods Market a couple of years ago, they've apparently decided to launch a new grocer. We've known about this for a while, but I think kind of the bit that people missed was in all of the pandemic, crisis kind of rightly taking our attention last year. Amazon was really starting to build out this grocery chain from scratch. So there's now 11 Amazon Fresh locations. We were able to identify 28 more that are coming, and we're pretty sure that's an undercount. So they're definitely building this pretty quick.
All right, I have a million questions. First of all, what are these stores like? Are they mini Whole Foods? Are they mini regular supermarket? What are they?
The biggest difference between Whole Foods is, you'll find a lot more mainstream products on the shelves right now. Whole Foods, because of quality and health restrictions in some cases, they're not going to stock Coke or Cheetos and the like. That's not the case at Amazon Fresh. They're going to give you what they think you want. It's somewhere in between the size of a Trader Joe's, pretty small and pocket sized, and a big, full-blown Kroger, kind of a sort of middle ground in between, at least the first 11 stores are. So definitely a more mass market appeal that Amazon's going after with its new brand here.
It feels like, too, it has a high-tech vibe. You talk about in your reporting some technological flourishes. Tell us about them.
That's right. So the headline one is the Dash Smart Cart. Now, this is a kind of bulky cart that if you want to shop and go out of the store with less than 2 bags worth of stuff, you put an item in the cart. It automatically, through its cameras attached to the device, guesses usually pretty accurately what you put into it, and will charge you on the way out. So you can skip the line and the register and just walk out with that cart that has ideally again been able to detect what you put in it and charge a card on file.
Listen, ultimately, I mean, people will put up with maybe not the most high-tech kind of a supermarket if the prices are good. What are they going to do? Because supermarkets, listen, you know this, it's a really slim margin business. And the whole idea is you're selling a lot of stuff. What are they going to do with pricing? Because I'm sure at this point they just want to bring people in.
That's right. And every new grocery store that launches will discount heavily to get folks in the store. Amazon is no exception. But based on these initial pricing, anyway, in their new stores, it sure looks like they're going after customers of Walmart, of Aldi, of those discounters that can offer just rock bottom prices. They certainly seem to be trying to get a wide variety of folks in the store and kind of lure in that price conscious shopper that might have been wary of stepping inside of a Whole Foods.
Well, and I do wonder, Matt, I've covered two Whole Foods before they were bought and then when they were bought. And I think for all of us, it was a little bit of like a whoa. But we really thought it was a sign when Amazon bought Whole Foods that it was an indication of Amazon really leaning into groceries big time. And it doesn't feel like the Whole Foods acquisition has necessarily worked out like they thought.
It certainly hasn't been as transformative as people thought it might have been back in 2017. Amazon has added Prime perks to shopping at Whole Foods. They've turned on delivery and pickup from hundreds of stores, which is not something I think you would have seen at a Whole Foods had it stayed an independent company. But you're exactly right. Amazon's ambitions clearly lean more mainstream than the high-end organic set that shops at Whole Foods, and that's really in evidence with Amazon Fresh here.
Well, and I do wonder, is it kind of the Apple model, this whole idea of you're going to be, Apple, if you start buying Apple products, it's very easy to kind of stay and continue to buy Apple products because you want to stay within the Apple ecosystem, right? All their products talk so well to one another. What's interesting is I do think about Amazon, whether it's Prime, whether it's, they just want you increasingly to be on their platform in some form or another.
Yeah, exactly right. And you see Amazon's Alexa, the voice software. They've got devices throughout these new Fresh stores where you can say, hey, where's the ketchup? And it'll direct you. And I think you're right, too, in that Amazon wanted more points for shoppers to be able to return stuff, right? Their disadvantages, they ship stuff to your door. There's not a lot of places for you to come in and interact. So, these stores have prominent counters to kind of deal with online purchases that you might not have had in your neighborhood beforehand.
All right, Matt, so who needs to be shaking in their boots here in terms of the supermarket world or your Targets or your Walmarts where food is a big part of what brings people in initially sometimes?
Well, knowing Amazon, probably everyone's going to get skittish just because of the headlines. I think probably most immediately is kind of your mainstream grocers, analysts say, should be worried about this. Your Albertsons, your Krogers, folks who Amazon clearly right now is setting out to beat on price, and in some cases setting up shop real close to their existing stores.
Hey, one last quick question. Amazon, as you write, is known to experiment with shopping formats only to kind of quietly fold projects. Could they ultimately fold this? Who knows?
They certainly could, but grocery has been near and dear to their ambitions for a long time. I think there's no reason to think they're going to pull out of this one anytime soon.
All right, good stuff, and nice to get a gut check on what they are up to, even if they're doing it quietly. Hey, Matt Day, thank you so much. Technology reporter at Bloomberg News. Matt joining us on the phone from Seattle. By the way, Amazon shares just down about 4.4% so far in this year. And a quick check on how it traded today, up 1.8%. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Coming up, we've got a really special, neat guest coming up. We're going to check in with the president and CEO of Ocean Spray. He's joining us in just a second, right here on Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, I am a little obsessed with Master Hen because the sun is coming in over my shoulder. Gotta love it. I've also been obsessed with a TikTok video during the pandemic, which will bring us to our next guest, the Ocean Spray President and CEO. We'll get to Tom Hayes in just a second. First up, back to our top business stories. Some of that news, a bunch of it, after the closing bell that's got stocks moving. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there. Bunch indeed. Lots of headlines to get through. First of all, the United States has imposed new limits on licenses for some Huawei suppliers. That headline crossing the Bloomberg Professional Service. We're watching Novavax shares. They're surging 26% right now. Novavax's COVID-19 vaccine was 96.4% effective against mild, moderate, and severe symptoms of the disease in the final analysis of a late-stage trial in the UK. Again, shares up by just about 26%. Also keeping an eye on Ulta Beauty shares. They're plunging after the beauty retailer announced a sales outlook that did fall short of Wall Street estimates. Also a change of leadership. Ulta Beauty shares down now by 10%. And DocuSign forecast revenue for the first quarter, and that guidance did beat the average analyst estimate. Shares of DocuSign after hours up now by 2.9%. Records today for both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 index, powered by a renewed rally in tech shares as investors eye a $1.9 trillion spending injection from the federal government. S&P up 40, up by 1%. The Dow up 188 today, up 0.6%. NASDAQ up 329, a gain of 2.5%. 10-year yield 1.53%. Gold down 0.2%. 17.23 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.6%. 66.12 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Is Tom Hayes, the president and CEO of the ag cooperative Ocean Spray. Tom is also former CEO of Tyson Foods, and he joins us on the phone in Lakeville, Massachusetts. Nathan Apodaca, I don't think I'm saying it right. Apodaca, thank you. Apodaca. Tell us, first of all, Tom, where you were when you first heard and saw Nathan's video.
Hey, first of all, thanks for having me, Carol. It's great to be with you.
Yeah.
And when I first heard it and saw it, actually, was a friend of mine sent me a text, and he said, "You got to check this out." He goes, "What an amazing opportunity for Ocean Spray." So it was a buddy of mine sent it along, and it was really cool. I mean, I had the same sort of impression I think everybody did when they saw it, that this guy Nathan Apodaca was very sort of distraught on the one hand that his car his truck broke down and couldn't get to work. On the other hand, he sort of took it in stride and made this video, and everybody's like, "Wow, geez!" In a time when we need it, need that positivity, he delivered, and so that was the first time I saw it.
It was a lot of positivity. I mean, again, we talked about it so much in the newsroom, and you guys ended up, giving him a new cranberry red truck and a bunch of Ocean Spray as well. So kudos to you guys. You also did a similar video. And that's pretty cool that you did that.
Yeah, thanks. The team really sprung to action. They said, how can we take this opportunity and take it to its fullest extent and really help Nathan get, what he needs, which is a truck and transportation. And the team jumped to action, and we said, this is great. If we're going to do this for him and give him the transportation, why not make the truck cranberry red? And then why not load it up with, cran raspberry juice in the back, which is what he was drinking on the skateboard. And You know, when I was asked to play a role, I said, you know, absolutely, easy decision.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. And I'm not a skateboarder like he is, but I figured it out. And, you know, if Mick Fleetwood could do it, I figured, well, yeah, I should give it a shot.
We've been playing it all for the folks watching right now on YouTube. Hey, listen, so 1 year into the pandemic, you know, Tom, what stays with you from a year ago, and how do things look today?
You know, so for a year ago, things were obviously very different mood-wise. People were shocked, scared, not that they aren't now, but it was just nobody knew what to do. Now we do know what to do. Safety protocols in place at our plants. People, you know, certainly social distancing where they can, and we've, you know, unfortunately learned to sort of live with it. But I would say the thing that has changed at Ocean Spray beyond just the safety protocols is how do we take this opportunity to build positivity in all aspects of our business where we can? So whether it's through products and innovation, some of the new items that we've been coming out with, Ocean Spray Wave, which is a new sparkling beverage with caffeine, or Ocean Spray Metally snacking items that are taking the joy of, you know, dried cranberries and combining them with other, you know, cool new fruits to create some special moments for consumers. There's been a lot of talk about how do we take what was last year sort of a shocking and, you know, disturbing situation, and as we've moved through, you know, what's been, you know, a full year, like how do we make that, you know, a situation that's more of a positive experience for people to the best extent that we can.
Well, and I do think about, I want to ask you about the new products in terms of what consumers want, but I do want to ask you about the past year, because it has been something where all of a sudden inequities that have been in society for a long time really were front and center, and we're having discussions that maybe we weren't having before. What is the role, do you think, of companies and CEOs like yourself and leaders to help, you know, end the conversations or create conversations that result in deliberate action that actually make a difference?
I think with all leaders, you know, they are on top of organizations and leadership teams. So the organization and people that are attached to it, whether they're consumers with the brand or they're following on, you know, broadcasts like this, what leaders are doing, they're all looking up and they're looking for role models to, you know, say and do what they expect of, you know, good people. And differently than I think in past situations where people might have been slightly more distracted, they're really tuned in. And people were, you know, focused on the tubes in front of them or the, you know, phones in front of them, and they're just aware of what's happening. I think the moments that leaders have to say, you know, here's what we can do to help the situation versus exacerbate it and bring, you know, calmness and sanity back is really what we've tried to do at the company. And I think our board of directors is a very, you know, strong group of leaders that, you know, are farmers. They've been, you know, doing this for hundreds of years. Their families have, and they see an opportunity to say, look, well, we know stability, what it looks like, and, you know, team, we expect you to do that. And, you know, I'm in a fortunate position to lead and hopefully bring positivity and, you know, stability and, you know, some amount of certainty to where there's a lot of uncertainty.
Tom, hang on for a second. Got to do news, but we'll come back and continue in just a moment. Let's do a check on world and national news over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. In a surprise move, President Biden signed his massive COVID relief bill into law today, a day earlier than planned. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says checks to Americans are just days away.
Some people in the country will start seeing those direct deposits in their bank accounts this weekend, and payments to eligible Americans will continue throughout the course of the next several weeks.
Tonight, the president will deliver his first primetime address to the American public on the one-year anniversary of the pandemic. He's expected to turn his attention to a longer-term recovery package featuring infrastructure and climate measures. You can listen to his speech on Bloomberg Radio at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Majority of Americans, 65%, approve of how President Biden is handling the coronavirus pandemic, which he has called his top priority, but fewer, 48%, believe he's achieving his other key goal of uniting the country. Attorney General Merrick Garland, in his first day on the job at the Justice Department, urged all employees to follow legal norms in handling cases.
That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for friends and another for foes, one rule for the powerful and another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio, along with Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News. Charlie, interesting story on the Bloomberg, actually by our Bloomberg Opinion team, and it's talking about vaccine passports specifically. Our Tyler Cohen writing that the U.S. should develop a system to verify vaccinations but not necessarily use it. And this is the whole idea of having some sort of documentation that says, yep, I got the vaccine, to give you potentially freedom to roam around the country, the world, but an indication to show that as we move forward post-pandemic.
Yeah, one of the fantastic things about Bloomberg LP is the fact we get to work with not just smart people, but also incredibly thought-provoking people. Tyler Cowen is one of those people. He was out with the op-ed piece today talking about exactly what constitutes proof of vaccination. Now, for those of us who have had our 2 shots, you get a piece of brown paper that Tyler says looks highly forgeable. His point is well taken. It is a piece of paper that says, yes, you've had a vaccine, but suppose somebody comes up with fakes, which are easy to do. Suppose somebody steals a batch of them. All of a sudden, you're in the business of verifying that somebody has had a shot.
Yeah, exactly. And you do wonder about, what problems this ultimately creates going forward. And, we ask questions like, do Americans really want to create a country to which most foreigners would not be very welcome? And as you said, what counts as proof of foreign vaccination? I mean, you start to then get into what other countries are doing to verify it. We've had so much concern about data that came out from other countries, specifically China, when it came to COVID-19. So you do wonder, would we trust global vaccine passports or vaccine passports from other countries?
Exactly. And he cites the example of, say, for instance, an American living in Canada who got the AstraZeneca vaccine. That has been approved by 15 nations, but not the U.S. Then what?
Yeah, exactly. And then you get into booster shots and so on and so forth. So it's a tricky situation. We've talked about this a lot, too, with the hospitality industry. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Biden administration has informed some suppliers to China's Huawei Technologies of tighter conditions on previously approved export licenses prohibiting items for use in or with 5G devices, this according to sources. We're keeping an eye on Novavax shares. They are surging after hours, up now by 33%. Its COVID-19 vaccine was 96.4% effective against mild, moderate, and severe symptoms of the disease in the final analysis of a late-stage trial in the United Kingdom. S&P reclaiming a record today in a broad rally led by technology and consumer discretionary shares. The Dow also at a record. The Dow up today by 188 points, up 0.6%. Did finish off session highs. S&P up 40. That is a gain of 1%. NASDAQ up 329, up by 2.5%. 10-year yield 1.54% right now, with gold down $4 the ounce, down 0.3% at $17.22. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.4%, $66.01 a barrel. Again, recapping, Novavax surging 33% after hours. The Dow, S&P both at records. S&P up today by 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. Let's get right back to Tom Hayes. He's the president and CEO of the Ag Cooperative. We're talking about Ocean Spray. He's also former CEO of Tyson Foods. Tom's still with us on the phone in Lakeville, Massachusetts. Hey, Tom, what's interesting is, and I think about like the last year, I mean, companies continue to innovate. They continue to work on their strategies. You guys, have new products that have come out. Talk to us about what that development process was like and what's been guiding, the new offerings that you are coming out for consumers.
Sure. It's an interesting environment for sure, because retailers are not as excited about putting new products on the shelf when they don't have consumers as much as they have walking through the stores. It makes it, space is a premium. There's been certainly outages of products, as you are well aware. And so for consumer products companies, making sure that they're really on mark with what their brands are going to represent to that consumer, what's the insight that you're seeing. And what we have benefited from is the Ocean Spray brand, is 100 years old, nearly 90 years was last year, our 90th harvest.
Close.
And so that's right. And so innovation is against a brand that is well known and consumers find comfort in it is a space that we took advantage of. So what we've been doing is trying to move ourselves from not just the Norman Rockwell painting, but to be a little more attached to consumers that are newer consumers to us, millennials and younger consumers. And the way that we do that is to make sure that we're speaking to them in the channels that they want, but importantly giving them the products they want. So Ocean Spray Wave is a product that is a sparkling water, but infused with natural caffeine from tea, as well as the beautiful flavors that we offer at Ocean Spray and the combinations that we're so known for. So that's one of the things that we saw for sure, is that consumers are attracted to having not only hydration all day, but also they want an energy pickup. So having an infused beverage that meets those needs was certainly first on the radar. The second thing that we just introduced and have been making a big deal of it actually today is our new Fruit Melodies line. So that's thinking of the dried cranberry or craisin that we have all come to know and love, combining that with other products that bring immunity, fiber, and probiotics to consumers' lives. And so as they are looking for things that can help them get through this, certainly immunity blends, fiber blends, probiotics are things that resonate. And having the Ocean Spray brand there as a trusted brand, but also bringing in these new ideas is things that we hope are going to be really successul products for us as we pivot away from sort of our old past, but still embrace the brand that has brought us to the party. Yeah.
Well, and that's what I think a lot of brands that have been around for a century, right, are trying to figure out how to adapt to the new market. And I think about, I was listening to you as you were going through the Fruit Medley dried fruit blend products, like check in terms of, fruit. We're talking about no artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, people are increasingly, and we talk about this a lot on our air, looking, turning around, looking at what's in a product. My teenager does it. This is what people are looking for. And, you understand the food industry. Increasingly, is this where everything's going, as much as it can?
As much as it can. And you call out, I think, an important thing, that the consumer also wants to know that what they're buying is not only healthy for them, but they're doing good things for, the environment and so forth. So many consumers, want to make sure that they're buying from a purpose-driven brand. What, better purpose than what Ocean Spray has, which is to connect our farms to families for a better life. Being in business for 90 years and owned by farmers, or all the profit we make goes back to 700 farmer owners. I mean, there's no better purpose-driven company, in my view, in the business than that. And then the other thing is, thinking about what are we doing going forward? So we're not just happy with the fact that we are owned by farmers, which we love, but what are we going to do to represent what they believe they can do for the future with regenerative farming, which is one of the most beautiful things about agriculture in this space, is that we can actually do things that are better for the environment just by doing what we do, which is raising, fully antioxidant loaded, cranberry that can help, bring these wonderful products to market. Yeah.
But it's interesting what you talk about farming. We were talking with CEO at App Harvest, who was formerly CFO at Impossible. And what's interesting too is just, we are relooking at farming and how you do it, because it does impact the environment in big ways. Have you seen a lot of changes in terms of the farmer families that are part of Ocean Spray in terms of how they're doing things? Not because they want to, and also because of out of necessity.
Yeah, they so we all are concerned about certainly the world that we live in and the impact we're having. But think about the farmers, that's their life. I mean, there's no better steward of the land than a farmer, regardless of the crop that they're raising. And, our farmers, given that they're in regenerative agriculture, that revitalizes the soil, they look to the water around them because they need it to harvest. They want to make sure that they're actually improving the environment and leaving it better than before, because they're multi-generational. And let's say that this will be the third time, being in business for 90 years, some of these farms even go back before that, in the early 1800s, as the industry was getting going. Right. And they want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So they continue to push, whether it's with the right pest management and, being more focused towards going organic and using agriculture as a way to, step into new technologies. You wouldn't think there would be a lot, of that going on in the cranberry industry that's been around forever and cranberries. Right. But they really do think about ag technology and the things that, can even push us further.
Right. I can just imagine the innovation and the adaptations over, 100 years in terms of doing this. Hey, quick last question. When you look at the food industry, again, I mentioned you were, former head of Tyson Foods. What do you think the big trends, like our audience, investors, need to be keeping an eye on? Just got about 45 seconds.
Clean eating. People want food with fewer preservatives, and I'm sure your family's doing the same thing. People want that, but they also want great taste. So it's not a new insight. People want that, but it's harder to get, fantastic tasting products, because some of the things that are preservatives and otherwise are things that help them keep their great taste. Right. So I think investors should be looking for, what are those companies that are really threading the needle? They have fewer ingredients that they're using, and they're more clean ingredients, but they're also resonating with consumers, and they have fantastic taste that just excites people.
Well, really great to check in with you. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it, and good luck, and hopefully we can check in with you again in the future. Tom Hayes, President and CEO of Ocean Spray, on the phone in Massachusetts. Sound On with Kevin Cirilli coming your way. Kev, what's up?
I feel like you're telling me I need to eat healthier.
You do.
Congressman Michael Walz, Republican from Florida. Lots to talk about.
All right, looking forward to it. Put the chips down, Kevin. This is Bloomberg.